If one day you turned on the TV and heard, a foreign country has just announced it will send troops to invade the United States, would you believe it? Most people's first reaction would probably be to laugh. Not because war is funny, but because the idea of conquering America sounds so unrealistic it feels like a plot from a bad sci-fi movie. And yet, if we look back through history, no great power has ever been truly untouchable forever. The Roman Empire once thought it would last forever, but it collapsed. The British Empire once bragged that the sun never sets on its lands, yet it had to retreat. So why is it that in more than 200 years, no country has ever seriously tried to land troops and occupy the United States, while America itself constantly sends forces all over the world? The big question of today's video is, why does nitrogen monoxide one dare invade the US? Is it just because America has nuclear weapons, because its military is too strong? Or is there some kind of invisible shield that makes the idea of invading the US a suicidal choice from the very start? When we dig into this story, you'll see the answer doesn't lie in a single factor, but in a combination of geography, history, economy, technology, psychology, and even the shared fear of annihilation that hangs over all of humanity. To understand why no one dares to invade America, we first need to rewind the clock. In many people's minds, the US has always been an untouchable superpower, but in reality, America has been attacked before. Its capital was once burned, and it has known the fear of enemies approaching its doorstep. That was in the early 19th century, when the United States was still a young nation. Its military and economy were not yet dominant, and the European empires were still the main players on the global chessboard. In 1812, war broke out between the United States and Britain. At that time, America was still weak, with a small navy and a young, fragile industry. The British Empire, then the world's #1 naval power, sent troops across the ocean and even managed to burn both the White House and the Capitol in Washington. That was one of the rare moments when the core territory of the United States was directly touched by an enemy. The experience left a deep scar. America realized that if it wanted to survive in the long term, it could not rely on luck alone. From that trauma, the United States gradually built a strategy, turning its natural geography and growing economic power into a wall that few would dare test. After the Civil War, the country entered a period of rapid industrialization. By the time of the First World War, and especially the Second World War, the US had shifted from a relatively isolated state to the arsenal of democracy, pumping weapons, ammunition, and food to its allies. One crucial detail: all the major battles took place on the other side of the oceans, not on the American mainland. Imagine the map. The United States sits between two enormous oceans, the Pacific to the west and the Atlantic to the east. To the north is Canada, one of America's closest allies. To the south is Mexico, with many problems of its own, but not a military rival. There are no hostile great powers on its land borders. For any country to invade the US, it would have to cross thousands of kilometers of open ocean, bringing along troops, tanks, aircraft, fuel, and supplies. Then launch a massive amphibious operation and maintain a steady flow of logistics across waters patrolled by US submarines, aircraft, and fleets. Geography alone is already a warning. Coming here is not cheap, and there's a good chance you'll be sunk on the way. During World War II, both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan fantasized about striking America, but those plans were mostly propaganda or paper exercises. The hard military reality was clear. They could not even fully control Europe or Asia, let alone travel half the globe to land on a heavily defended continent with a powerful industrial base, a large population, and a high fighting spirit. But geography is only the first layer of defense. The second layer, and the one that makes strategists all over the world think twice about every move, is American military power. Since the end of World War II, the United States has maintained one of the strongest and most technologically advanced militaries on the planet, with an enormous annual defense budget. This does not just mean lots of tanks, planes, and warships, but also advanced technology, intelligence networks, satellites, radar systems, and a global web of bases. If you want to invade the US, that means you must face an air force capable of reaching almost any point on Earth, a navy with carrier strike groups and nuclear submarines, and missile forces that can respond from land, sea, and air. America does not sit and wait to be attacked on its coastlines. It has the capacity to bring the battlefield to the enemy's doorstep, intercepting threats far away, breaking supply lines, and destroying enemy command centers long before any landing craft could glimpse an American beach. However, the factor that truly makes everyone hesitate is not just conventional strength. After 1945, a new element appeared: nuclear weapons. The United States was the first country to develop and use atomic bombs in war. Later, the Soviet Union and several other states also built nuclear arsenals. But to this day, the US remains one of the countries with the largest nuclear stockpiles and a complete nuclear triad: land-based missiles, submarine-launched missiles, and strategic bombers. This leads to a cold, harsh reality. Any country dreaming of invading and occupying America must accept the risk of nuclear retaliation not from a single warhead, but from many. Invading the US means pushing your own country, and possibly all of humanity, toward the brink of destruction. In strategic logic, that is not a war, it is mass suicide. This is the core of nuclear deterrence. No one is reckless enough to fight a war in which even the winner is destroyed. Looking at the bigger picture, if someone really wanted to land troops on American soil, they would have to cross the oceans, evade or defeat the US fleet, endure long-range airstrikes, and stare down a nuclear deterrent that never sleeps. And that is only the beginning. Even if, by some miracle, they manage to land on the coast, what happens next? At this point, another factor comes into play: American society, the American people, and a culture of refusing to submit, forged through the War of Independence, the Civil War, and countless conflicts since. Unlike many countries where most weapons are held by the military, the United States is a society with a very high rate of civilian gun ownership. This creates many internal debates, tragedies, and serious problems for Americans themselves. But in the scenario of a foreign invasion, it means any occupying force would face a dispersed, unpredictable resistance network. Not only regular troops, but armed civilians, local militias, and community-based fighters. History shows that taking a city is never the hardest part. Keeping it is the real nightmare. The US learned this directly in Iraq and Afghanistan. It had superior firepower, technology, and organization, yet still faced guerrilla warfare, small armed groups, difficult terrain, and societies unwilling to accept a long-term foreign presence. If even America struggled to occupy much smaller countries, then any force trying to occupy the United States itself would face an Iraq on steroids, multiplied many times over. That is why, in serious strategic planning, you rarely see invade and occupy the US discussed as a realistic option. The military cost is enormous, the political risk is extreme, nuclear escalation is always possible, and the chances of actually controlling a vast country of more than 300 million people with a powerful economy and a culture that values freedom and resistance are close to zero. From a cost-benefit perspective, this is a spectacularly bad investment, but that is still only the military side. There is a deeper layer: alliances and the international order. The United States does not exist as a lonely fortress, but as the center of a network of alliances and partnerships across Europe, the Asia-Pacific, and beyond. If a state attacks America, it is not just confronting Washington. It risks drawing in NATO and several other allies. That turns a war against the US into a global conflict, where the attacker must be ready to face multiple major powers at once. Imagine a country launching a war on the United States. Immediately, it is not just US forces that react. European allies reinforce their defenses, and some may join the fight. In the Pacific, partners like Japan, South Korea, and Australia adjust their strategies. Global financial markets tremble. Capital flees the aggressor. Economic sanctions crash down. A war that was already nearly unwinnable militarily now carries a colossal economic and diplomatic price tag. On the other side, America's economic and financial power means that fighting the US is not just a matter of tanks and missiles. It is also a matter of shooting yourself in the foot. The world economy depends heavily on the US dollar. The American market, US technology and services, and supply chains rooted in or linked to the United States. Any major country that chooses open warfare with the US must accept being cut off from a large part of the global economic system, something few are willing to risk in an age of deep interdependence, unless they are truly desperate. At this point, we can draw an interim conclusion. No one dares invade America not because the country is some kind of perfect heavenly kingdom, but because the invasion problem is too hard, too expensive, and too risky. Geography is the natural wall. The military is the steel armor. Nuclear weapons are the self-destruct button that scares everyone. Society and culture are the thickets of thorns that bleed any occupier white. Alliances and economic influence turn the whole invasion idea into a strategic suicide mission. However, saying no one dares invade the US does not mean America is absolutely safe. The forms of conflict are changing. Instead of sending tanks and troops across oceans, hostile states and other actors can choose cyber warfare, attacking digital infrastructure, disrupting power grids, banks, and communication networks. They can wage information war, spreading disinformation, manipulating public opinion, and deepening internal divisions within American society. These are soft invasions that do not seize territory, but can undermine a country's political and social foundations from within. At another level, economic and technological competition over artificial intelligence, high-tech, and outer space is becoming a new battlefield. The United States may not fear enemy tanks rolling through New York, but it does fear losing its lead in key strategic sectors. If that leadership erodes, military strength and deterrence will also suffer. A weaker, more divided, and technologically lagging America would be more vulnerable in all kinds of conflicts, even if those conflicts do not look like the traditional invasions described in history books. So the question, why does no one dare invade the US? Leads to another, what must America do to remain uninvadable in the 21st century? The answer is not just build more weapons or increase the defense budget. It also lies in maintaining a stable society, a dynamic economy, a political system capable of self-correction, reducing internal polarization, and sustaining a trustworthy network of allies. When these foundations are solid, American hard power and soft power together form a powerful shield. From a distance, the image of the United States often gets reduced to slogans: superpower, world's policeman, empire, or land of opportunity. But behind those labels lies a far more complex reality. America is a nation that is both strong and fragile, wealthy yet full of internal contradictions, a dream destination for many and a constant target of criticism. The fact that no one dares invade the US does not mean it has no enemies. It means those enemies understand that sending armies, ships, and tanks to conquer it is a guaranteed disaster. And that is one of the paradoxes of the nuclear age. The very fear of total destruction creates a certain degree of stability between great powers. No one wants to be the first to pull the trigger, a war where there will be nothing left to enjoy afterward. In that context, the United States, with its favorable geography, powerful military, huge economy, and wide alliance network, becomes a target that every strategist is forced to acknowledge. It is better to compete, contain, and influence than to invade. In the end, when someone says no country dares invade the US, it is not simply bragging about American power. It is an observation about how the current world order operates. Geography, history, nuclear weapons, the economy, alliances, and culture all combine to make the idea of invading the United States a game with no rational players. At the same time, this reminds us that safety in the future is never guaranteed by default. One day, if these factors change, if the world enters a new era of chaos, the question who dares may not sound as impossible as it does today. And perhaps, to avoid that scenario, not just America, but the rest of the world as well has a shared interest in making sure that invasion remains the dumbest idea any leader could ever have.